They sent me a 3D printer and I ended up printing more than 25 different objects. I even printed some that are technically forbidden. And this other thing you see here will blow your mind. I'll show it to you at the end. The printer is the Creality High Combo, a fast printer specifically designed for people who are just getting started in the world of 3D printing. I thought it would be really complicated, and although I did make some mistakes, which I'll tell you about later, the learning process was super intuitive, and within about an hour, I was already printing my 3D models. The price of the standalone Creality High is $500, and the Creality High Combo, which is the one I have, costs $700. The combo part is because it includes a CFS, which allows you to load 4 spools of filament in different colors. That way, when you're printing in multicolor, the printer automatically switches colors. You can connect up to 4 CFS units in series, allowing you to use up to 16 colors at the same time. Stick with me through this whole video so you can see all the advantages of this amazing printer, and I can also show you all the cool stuff I printed. This giant box is where you receive your Creality High Combo. Besides the printer, they also sent me 3 kilos of filament. When I started unpacking everything, I had no idea what most of it was, but now I know what each part is. That white thing is the PVC tube where the filament travels. On the right are the CFS cables. This here is the hub used by the CFS, or for connecting 4 CFS units. The first thing out of the box is the CFS itself. It comes completely ready to go, no assembly required. Inside the box, there's a piece of cardboard with instructions. This is the top part of the printer, and here's the bed, or the bottom part. Here we were, 2 human beings of questionable intellect, trying to remove the plastic wrapping. We tried with a knife, with scissors, and struggled a lot. Then I realized the box actually included some pliers specifically meant to cut that plastic, but oh well. As extras, we've got a bit of white filament that you can use for testing, maybe around 100 grams. You'll also find manuals and tools, in case you ever need to take the printer apart. Inside the box, there were also some stickers that look really nice. Now let's move on to the assembly, which is actually quite simple. You move the heated bed to the front, place the top part in position. There's no way to get it wrong. It only fits one way. It takes 3 screws on each side, and they're all the same, so there's no way to mess that up either. Once you've inserted the screws, you connect the cables. You just push them in until they click. Then you put on these plastic covers, which are just for looks. The base has a thick cable that you need to run up one of the arms. Feed it through some plastic brackets and connect it, and that's it. Your printer is pretty much assembled. It's designed so everything is easy. It won't take you more than 10 minutes to put it together, and you absolutely don't need any help. You can do it all by yourself. Here, I opened one of the filaments to start doing some tests. First step to insert the filament is placing the Teflon tube. It's a kind of small hose where the filament travels through. You connect one end to the printer's extruder and the other to the spool holder. We peel off the protective film. From the touch screen, turn on the printer, and here on the screen, a couple of settings appear. You simply connect it to Wi-Fi, choose your language, and it will automatically start making some movements. These movements are basically to calibrate and adjust itself. Once leveling is complete, now we can load the filament. You place the spool in position, feed the filament through the PVC tube, and push it in. When it reaches the extruder, a little blue LED lights up. There's a small lever here. You press it and push the filament a bit more until you hear a sort of click. Then release the lever, and that's it. Now you can start printing whatever you want. The printer comes preloaded with some object models that can be useful for the printer itself. I picked one, hit print, and it started printing. Honestly, I was surprised by how fast it prints. This particular print only took 20 minutes and used 10 grams of filament. Since it was my first print, I had no idea how to remove the piece properly. I messed up the test while trying to take it off, and it broke completely. Once your print is done, you can plug in a USB drive and export the time-lapse. The printer has a camera, which is very low quality, but it's good enough to record the process. After that test, I wanted to connect the CFS for multicolor printing. First step is to stick the hub using double-sided tape. You can attach it to one of the printer's arms, preferably on the right side, since that's where the CFS connects. Now you connect a PVC tube from the hub to the extruder. Then connect the two cables from the box to the CFS. One goes into the hub and the other into the printer. Finally, connect another PVC tube from the CFS to the hub, and just like that, your CFS is all set up. When you turn on the printer, its little screen will light up. Inside the CFS, there are some grids, and here is the desiccant. This is the first time you're going to use the CFS. You need to take the desiccants out of their little bag. They're the ones in charge of absorbing moisture. One important thing that this CFS does is keep the filament from getting too humid, since this filament can get damaged if there's too much moisture. In fact, on the front part of the CFS, on the little screen, you can see both the temperature and the humidity levels. This is where you'll place your filament rolls and feed the filament through the little tubes. As soon as it detects the filament, the roller starts spinning automatically. You don't have to do anything at all. It configures everything and sets the colors by itself. Well, as long as the filament is original from Creality. If not, then you'll need to manually configure the filament settings and the color. Make sure to seal the CFS properly using the locks so that the humidity can start decreasing gradually. Over on the printer's screen, the colors will appear automatically. When you start printing and the CFS is connected, filament loading will be completely automatic. After printing that first piece, I wanted to print something really cool. And here comes a very important point. You don't need any knowledge of 3D modeling to be able to print. By visiting the Creality Cloud website, you can find hundreds of models to choose from and print. In fact, you don't even have to use a computer. With your phone, you can link the printer, go into Creality Cloud, pick the model, and send it straight to print. There are models for anything you can think of. It even has a search bar where you can look up, for example, a phone holder, a toy, a kitchen item, or anything you need. Some models are paid and others are free. But don't worry, all the items I'll show you in this video were completely free. You just need to know how to search. Also, it's not necessary to download. Only from Creality Cloud. You can go online and look for 3D printer models, and you'll find them. These models need to go through a slicer program. This is the software that divides each model into layers so the printer can print them. In the slicer, you can choose settings like speed, filament type, and more complex options. It also tells you how long the print will take and how many grams of filament it will use. The second model I decided to print was a pretty simple one, a little boat. It took 32 minutes and used only 11 grams of filament. By the way, from the phone app, you can view the live camera feed. So if you leave home, you can monitor the status of your print. And of course, you can do this from a computer too. You must be very careful with the printer. The bed heats up to around 60 degrees, which is very hot, and the little nozzle that melts the plastic heats up to 220 degrees. So be careful. In fact, at first, I had it in the room where I work, and that room is air-conditioned. I thought it was contradictory to have a hot printer in a cold room, so I decided to move it to a room without climate control. Big mistake. It ended up going very badly, but I'll tell you more about that a little later. After printing the little boat, I really wanted to print something with a lot of style. I decided to start with a laptop stand that had multiple pieces and had to be assembled. This stand used 62 grams and took 2.5 hours. It was a bit tricky to put together because the pieces were very small, but it was fun. I even added some metal screws to make it sturdier. Sadly, it didn't work with my laptop because my laptop is quite thick, and the bottom part, where it's supposed to rest, kept slipping off. The only way it could somewhat work was by closing the laptop. That way it stayed in place a bit better, but I still didn't feel confident about it. What it did work for, and worked very well, was a tablet. Since tablets are much lighter and thinner, and because the stand is height adjustable, it actually fit really nicely. Even so, I didn't want to give up on printing a stand for my laptop. So I kept searching and eventually found another model that was better designed. This one did use way more material, 110 grams of filament, and the printing time was about the same, 2 hours and 50 minutes. But now this one worked perfectly. These little screws here took 30 minutes and 7 grams of filament. I bet you have no idea what they're for. Ever since I built this PC, I added this card, which is kind of funny. A card for the graphics card. Anyway, I had put this old debit card that no longer worked to support the graphics card a bit so it wouldn't sag. Believe it or not, it's been there for like 5 years. I even added black tape to camouflage it a bit. Well, that won't be necessary anymore because the screw I printed is specifically for graphics cards. You place it here and use the threaded part to adjust the height. this gadget the moment I saw it, I knew I had to try it. The best part is that it only used 11 grams of filament and took 30 minutes to print. This particular design is made for Xbox controllers, but there was also one for PlayStation controllers. The point is, it's like a little steering wheel with gears that, as you turn them, move the stick, but with much more sensitivity, like a mini steering wheel. It's super useful for racing games, allowing for more precise movements than you could make with just the stick. For 11 grams of filament, it's totally worth trying. Something almost everyone prints with their first 3D printer is phone stands, and I didn't want to be left out. I searched for a few models, and this was the first one I printed. Total fail. I don't know why, but it was really thin and super flimsy, just all wobbly. Strangely enough, when I placed the phone on it, it would stay still, but I don't think that's how it was supposed to work. That's something else I learned. Not all 3D models you find online are good. You need to check them carefully before printing. Anyway, the only bad thing about that model was that it was too thin. Luckily, it didn't use too much filament. About 13 grams, but I still wanted a proper phone stand, so I printed another one. This one took an hour and used 12 grams of filament. And this one, finally, was solid and worked perfectly. Actually, the first one I made was pink, and I liked it so much that I printed a second one in black. For 12 grams of filament, it was totally worth it. What you see here is also a stand for phones, but also for tablets and even for the Nintendo Switch. In fact, this slot on this side is perfectly designed for the regular Nintendo Switch, and on the other side, well, that's where you can place tablets and phones. But you're probably wondering how it's used or what those hooks are for. This stand is designed for cars. You know those two little metal rods on the headrests of car seats? That's exactly where you attach the hooks, and that's it. You can mount your tablet. This actually adds some style to the car since it looks like your car is tuned and has built-in screens, almost like a high-end vehicle. It works perfectly. Well, not if you're the driver like me, but if you're always riding in the back seat, it's great. And if you usually take long trips and have a tablet, you can enjoy a movie like you're in first class. The print time was 3 hours, and it used 81 grams of filament. This is how I used to leave my headphones lying around, but they always kept falling off, so since I had the printer, I wasn't going to miss the chance to print a headphone stand. 2.5 hours of print time and 76 grams of filament. It's a pretty big stand, and it has a huge screw so you can tighten it and keep it from falling. On my desk, I barely had to tighten it. It fits snugly. In fact, it just barely fit, and it holds perfectly. What I like most is that it holds 2 items. For example, you can place a phone and some headphones, or 2 pairs of headphones, or headphones and their cables. These 2 clamps right here. To be honest, I don't even know why I printed them. I just liked them when I saw them, and I simply wanted to have them. They took 1 hour and 20 minutes to print and used only 27 grams of filament, both of them. Since we're talking about screws and gamer setups, I also printed this cable holder. It took 1 hour to print and used 13 grams of filament, but I didn't realize it was way too small. It didn't quite fit well on my desk. Still, I could place it sideways, and it kind of does the job of keeping cables handy, though not visible. This phone item is one that definitely catches the eye, and I'm sure a lot of people will want to try it. And trust me, it's fun. That said, it took 5 hours and 20 minutes to print, and it used the most filament so far, 155 grams. As you can see, it's a phone stand with a steering wheel and gears. When you turn the wheel, the X-shaped holder spins. So when you place your phone there and open a racing game, you can steer with the mini wheel. It gives you a fun and somewhat realistic feeling. Of course, it's not exactly a simulator, it's still just a toy, but a very cool toy nonetheless. This one here, I'm sure most console gamers are going to want it. It's a controller stand, but it holds 2 controllers stacked like a tower. This saves space, while also displaying them in a cool way. It took 2 hours to print and used 83 grams of filament. For car lovers, these 2 accessories were a must. Together, they took just 30 minutes and used 17 grams of filament. They're the ramps Lightning McQueen uses when he needs maintenance or just wants to show off and stand out. This right here is my Nintendo Wii, and as you can see, it's missing the side cover. I looked up the model online, and ta-da, I found it. It's slightly modified, but I liked it. It even has the holes for the original Wii screws. I removed the screws from the Wii, installed the cover, screwed it in, and it turned out perfect, 10 out of 10. Sure, the color doesn't match perfectly, but hey, that just depends on having the right filament and the right Wii color. It took 30 minutes and only used 15 grams of filament. This was definitely the ugliest print I made. It only used 3 grams of filament and took 22 minutes. As you can see, it's supposed to be a miniature graphics card that replaces a key on your keyboard. If it had turned out right, it would have looked awesome, 10 out of 10. But honestly, it didn't turn out great. Trying to take advantage of multicolor printing, I came up with the idea to make small keychains. I designed a few, and they came out really nice. Then, in the Creality slicer software, you can configure the painting. I only had 3 colors, and the slicer showed me which ones I had available in the CFS. There are some brushes and other tools to paint your 3D models, so I painted the lower part one color and the upper part, or the raised area where the name is, another color. I started the print, and it all came out great. Halfway through the print, the printer automatically changed the color, and the keychains turned out really cute. In total, I used 50 grams of filament for all the keychains, and it took 2 hours to print them. So each one used between 7 and 10 grams, more or less. Something I forgot to mention is that every time the printer changes color, or even when it loads filament for the first time, it makes a bit of a mess. It pushes out a bit of melted plastic fuzz as a purge, then starts printing. At the end, I'll show you all the waste I generated and how many grams of waste I had. These dinosaurs caught my attention because they had moving parts. It's honestly impressive because they're printed in one single go. Don't think they're separate pieces you assemble. As you see them, that's how they were printed. Each one took 45 minutes and used only 15 grams of filament. When I saw how successful the dinosaurs were, I decided to try something even more interesting, a giant dragon. Well, not that giant, but it's easily about 30 centimeters long. Just like the dinosaurs, it prints in one piece and has flexibility. It printed perfectly with no flaws. It took 4 hours and 20 minutes and used 60 grams of filament. This one here, you'll never guess what it is or what it's for. It took an hour to print and only used 21 grams of filament. It's made up of several individual pieces. In fact, I had to assemble this one, but to be honest, it's not useful at all. It's just some sort of little fidget toy for anxiety. I found this model purely by coincidence and thought it looked pretty cool. It's a decoration for a gamer zone, and with the filament colors I had, I felt it could look great. It took 2.5 hours and used only 60 grams of filament. The size was just right. I only needed a little nail to hang it up. Lastly, I kept seeing online that many people with 3D printers made really eye-catching and interesting figures. I didn't want to be left out, so I picked 2 small figurines of the same size and one forbidden one, a bit larger. I won't lie to you, this was all done in the name of science. These were essential technical tests to put a 3D printer's potential to the test. Honestly, I didn't like the first 3 designs much. They took 3 hours and 26 minutes and only used 30 grams of filament, but since these types of characters have many floating areas, they required a lot of supports. And those supports in turn needed special settings if you didn't want a nightmare when removing them. The thing is, my 3D figurines didn't turn out all that great. I didn't really like them, and I don't even know why, but the leg of the forbidden one came out in the wrong place. Still, it's fine. I did a bit of surgery with a soldering iron and fixed it. Well, sort of. I didn't make it perfect, but at least she could stand upright. Even so, I wasn't satisfied with the result, so I thought that maybe printing a larger model would give more detail and a better outcome. 6 hours later and 60 grams of filament in, I had this slightly bigger figure, but again, I had a lot of trouble with the supports, especially the hair. Removing them was a hassle. In fact, 60 grams were for the character, but another 60 grams were just waste. So in total, it was about 120 grams. I wasn't very happy with the result. What I should have done was lower the filament flow to make the thread thinner and print much slower for better precision. I used ChatGPT and asked for some reference settings. I applied the exact configuration ChatGPT gave me. 4 hours later, and just 27 grams of filament used, I had this 3D figure that, honestly, turned out 10 out of 10. This time you could really see the detail. Perfect curves, well-defined face. This time, in the name of science, it was a victory. Long live science. Something that I found really interesting is that some people print 3D figures and then paint them with acrylics, turning them into real works of art. Those were all the pieces. I printed with my new Creality high combo printer, about 25 in total. Including waste, I used up around 1.2 kilograms, meaning I wasted about 230 grams. But honestly, a lot of that waste was my fault, partly because I didn't know how to use supports properly, and partly because many prints were misconfigured or I stopped them halfway through, so they ended up wasted. As for beginner mistakes, one of them was that I handled the printer poorly and ended up scratching the bed. My bad. Luckily, it didn't significantly affect the prints, and this bed can be replaced for just $15. The good news is the nozzle was fine. Another issue I had, and this one I really didn't like due to where I live, was that, if you recall, I had to take the printer out of my air-conditioned room because it made the room too hot. For optimal performance, the printer needs to be in an environment under 35 degrees C, but where I live, it's usually around 45 degrees C. So for this printer to work properly, I'd need to keep it in an air-conditioned room, which would mean higher costs, unsustainable for me. One problem caused by the excess heat was that the filament melted before reaching the hot end, causing the gears to jam. I had to take it apart a couple of times and ask the people who sent it what was going on. They confirmed it was due to the high heat in my area. Once I moved it back into the air-conditioned room, the problem disappeared. You don't need an ice-cold room, but yes, it needs to stay below 35 degrees C. In the end, it's up to you. Tell me, what did you think of the printer? What gadget did you like most? What would you like to print? Huge thanks to Creality for sponsoring this video. That's it from me. By the way, that thing I said at the beginning that would blow your mind, it was this. But no, I didn't make it with the 3D printer. It's just a Minecraft popcorn bucket they sell at Cinepolis.